again, going back to this after a day, I was going to say a day off, but it was really just a day where a bunch of really urgent accounting stuff had to be done. And the problems I was trying to solve were two. There was, like, how do you ensure that every station in the galaxy is liberatable without, whilst also making it so that the set of stations you can liberate at any given stage is relatively small and logical, so the player can predict how liberating one station will lead on to being able to liberate others. And then the other problem was, how do we make sure that certain technologies are within easy unlocking range of your starting position, given that we don't really control how close any given faction's territory is going to be to your starting location, and technologies are tied to factions. So the first problem, I think the way I'm going to tackle it is, when we trigger a liberation, to decide which station should be your options, I will start from a particular station. It'll be the one you're at when you're doing liberation, and kind of divide the angles around it up into like 6 or 8, and for each kind of segment like this, for like within this 60 degrees, what is the closest station where the direction to that station is within that range, and then for the next 60 degrees, what's the closest station there? And so you pick one for each segment, if there's any at all. If you're at the edge of the galaxy, obviously there'll be none in that direction. And so we are looking for the closest one. We'll be biasing it towards closer ones, but if you're on the edge of this cluster of stations and there's another cluster of stations that's really far away, the fact that they're really far away doesn't mean that you can't get to them, because within that segment, a station from that cluster will be the closest one. And if that's not true from this station, then whatever station you have to capture over here until you really are at the edge of it, that will ensure that there'll always be a way of getting to it. So like whatever rule I have for liberating stations, it has to be one where any reason that we can't liberate station X is a reason we can get around by liberating some other station, station Y, station Z. Like once station X is the last unliberated station in the galaxy, it has to be liberatable, right? And that won't actually come up, but the point is, if there's a specific one you want to liberate, I don't want to worry about the fact that it could be unliberatable from some situation. So I think that seems pretty logical. Then for the ensuring certain technologies are close enough to you, I'm going to tweak, at the very least, how the faction territories kind of start and where the home station goes, the first liberated station. I think more likely I'm going to take a look at how faction territories are distributed right now and just do it a different way. Now that we know there's one particular station that is the home station, I think we could start with that in the centre of the galaxy, and then surrounding it pick one of these stations to be Sovereign, one of these stations to be Off-World, one of these stations to be Glitcher. And then from there, everything that's closer to the Sovereign station becomes Sovereign, everything that's closer to the Glitcher station becomes Glitcher. And I do want to ensure certain numbers of stations for certain factions. I want every faction to have at least, I don't know, 12 stations. And I also kind of want Sovereign to be the biggest one. Right now, the current generator, the Sovereign is pretty much always the biggest one, and often by a huge margin, because there's some kind of, I can't remember what it is, it's something like the sort of, it picks everyone else's territory first, and then the rest are Sovereign, and so how many that is can vary perhaps too much. So yeah, that is it. I also, once I took a break, or almost as soon as I stopped working, I started to have a bunch of new ideas. One of which was a way to solve the liberation problem. Actually, I've changed my mind about. I was going to do it by line of sight, which sounds weird, but treating the trade routes as if they're solid walls, and then looking for things that aren't blocked by those. That just this morning I realised there's a problem with that, and that the segment thing came out of that. It was what's the problem with the line of sight thing? Well, you might get loads and loads of stations in one direction and not so many others. Oh, we should divide it by direction. And I had a idea I really like for how liberations are triggered, like when they're triggered. Because right now it's every 20 missions, and that was kind of placeholder, and I was doing the right thing, which is don't try and solve the problem right away. Just put something in there that looks a bit like what you end up with, and then wait until something occurs to you that fixes that problem. And something did occur to me, which is I've also been always planning that you should be able to, once you've secured a ship, if you've taken out all the enemies, you should be able to send it back to your station. And then I was going to give you like some salvage value for it, just some money. But actually, that's not that interesting. But it would be cool if they became like a resource. The number of ships you've captured at that station is a kind of resource in itself. And you could then, once you had a certain number, that would be what unlocks liberations. And that makes a lot of sense, because if you're going to go and liberate a station, the personal mission you do there, the sort of like the long thing you're working towards, is taking over the station itself. But the faction you're taking it from has a bunch of like ships, military ships, who will try and stop you. And so we can just say like, okay, in order to liberate any of these stations, you're going to need about 20 ships. So that we can send them, mostly unmanned, to go and distract that faction's military while we sneak in and do the station takeover. And that's nice because gives capturing ships a purpose that's distinct from money, which prevents money glut and also makes it more interesting. And it means that you can sort of intentionally work towards liberation more than just doing missions. You already do missions to get money for your personal goal, and now working towards the other longer term progress is something that you can intentionally decide to do by taking a bit longer on this mission to secure the ship properly and send it somewhere. It also explains why you can only liberate one. Like, if the reason you can liberate the stations is because they want to be liberated, then why can't, after you liberate one of them, why can't you immediately liberate all the rest as well? Because they still want to be liberated, right? I was going to do some sort of hand-waving about all the nearby factions clamp down after a liberation, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It makes more sense if you're just spending a resource. You have 20 ships, you're going to send them to distract that faction's military, you're going to lose all those ships. You're not going to... I think the idea is like, we'd say, oh, we're just going to put one person aboard each of them to fly them out there, then they're going to like get back into their escape pods and come back, and then those ships will just be destroyed. And not... I don't want a huge amount of loss of life in terms of like how you go about your goals. The whole idea is you're sort of your spies and your infiltrators, and you are about doing things elegantly without causing huge bloodshed. So you'd be distracting that military not to fight them, but just to lose the fight, just to lose all those ships, and use that window of opportunity to take over the station. So yeah, that's also why I wanted to take a break from the other problems I was looking at. Like, the day before yesterday, they seemed pretty complex. And now when I come back to them, it's just like, well, the segment one is pretty simple, that's a simple solution, and then the making certain technologies spawn close enough to you, that's a really trivial problem, really. Like, that's just something I can force in how I distribute faction territory, which surely is easy.